Hey folks, hey Brad Miller, flybass.com and flybass.biz. Flybass.com is a informational site about fly fishing for larger game fish like smallmouth bass. And flybass.biz is an online fly shop. Today we're going to be talking about vices. You know, everybody has vices, and in my world, the more vices the better, especially when it comes to these kind of vices. We're going to talk today about different types of vices, and whether you're a beginner or whether you're a seasoned fly tyer and you're looking potentially to upgrade your vices, what kind of characteristics to look for when it comes to making those decisions. And the first one I'm going to talk about today is a good old Warhorse, the old Thompson I got with a kit when I first started out tying. And you know, they're just a very simple vise, just sort of the standard kit type vise you'd get. For those of you just starting out, you might consider purchasing a kit that would provide you with materials, tools, and a vise for getting started in tying. And this is probably the type of vise you'd get with it. And these work fine. They were especially good if you're traveling or if you're kind of rough on them, but not a lot of variability as far as what you can do with the jaws, which is the part that grips the hook right here. And then the gap here, you can actually change that a little bit, but it's not as handy as it is with some of the more advanced models. But a nice way to get started and very inexpensive. You can pick up a vise like this for under $40. To take it one step further, this is a stationary vise, a non-rotational vise, but this is a much higher quality vise, and this one comes on a pedestal base. You can usually get a vise either with a pedestal base or a C-clamp to go on a table depending on where you're going to tie. And I must say that I've kind of gone towards the pedestals just because it's so easy just to set them away and then just grab them and they're ready to go. You don't have to crank them onto a table or anything like that. But you certainly can get a C-clamp. Sometimes it's good to have both if you're traveling. This one happens to be from Peak. Very easy to set the aperture, the gap on the vise here with this little nut right here, and then you just clamp it on down and away you go. Very well made type product. There's several of these type of fixed angled non-rotational vices on the market. Pretty inexpensive and a good way to get started again. If you're not going to be doing a lot of fancy tying, you're not going to be twirling a lot of materials onto your flies, or you just want to save some money and get an inexpensive vise, these fixed angle vices work very well. By the way, most of these vices are available on flybass.biz. There's videos on how they work and how to use them on there, quite extensive videos. This one is not, however. This is an old Regal that I have, and I'm showing you this just because of the very interesting way that they've got of opening and closing the jaws in this vise. And the Regal vices have been around for a long time. They've got other types of vices on their line. The problem I have with this vise a little bit is that the base is too light, and if you're really torquing on it, it'll rock. But I've used this vise for years and years, and a very nice vise, very well made, very well machined, and an interesting way of getting the hook on there and off of there. As we move up towards vices that'll give you some rotational options. This one happens to be the this is the Patriot from Griffin, Kalispell, Montana. This has got a nice heavy base on it. It's one of my favorite vices, I think, mainly because it looks so cool. It kind of looks like a missile or something like that, ready to launch. And I always like the way this thing looks. The cam system on this is really cool. It's got this lever right here. You set it so that your fly just barely moves in there with a little bit of tension. This is the same for any type of a jaws on any vise. And then you move that cam forward and you've got a really great fixation there on that fly. You can also use this lever in the back to loosen it up, and then you can turn it to look at different aspects of the fly. It's not really a rotational vise as such, but it can be rotated, and you use this lever in the back to tighten it down, and then it won't rotate at all. But I like it because I can loosen it up a little bit, then I can turn this and look at different alignments of the fly and make sure that everything's balanced properly. Extremely important with your surface poppers to make sure they're riding level and they're not off to one side one way or the other. If they don't chug nice and straight and flat, you're going to be losing some action on those flies and you won't catch as many fish. So very important aspect of it. But the Patriot from Griffin is a great vise that gives you some rotational capability, but not free rotation like some of the ones we're going to look at now. This next one here is a HMH vise. This happens to be the Spartan from HMH. They've got 3 or 4 different models. This is a sort of a mid-priced model here. I think HMH probably has as high of standard and tolerances as far as machining goes of any vise I've seen. Just very, very high quality, well-made vise. Nice heavy pedestal here. Clamps are available. All these stems on all these vices are 3/8 of an inch, and they can be interchangeable in different pedestals. So don't be afraid to buy a different pedestal for a different vise. They pretty much all work together. This one is really easy to use, and if you'll notice, if I was going to buy just one vise and I didn't want to get the wild-looking offset rotary, you know, this HMH is about as simple as you can get. You can either cock it up and use it as sort of a stationary vise like the Patriot I just showed you, or I like to bring it down to horizontal, and then instead of having a separate knob to twirl this thing, the actual apparatus that tightens the jaws also doubles as your turnstile, and real slick. You adjust the motion here with this gold colored knurl nut there, and I can tighten that down to where it won't hardly move at all. But very, very well made and very easy to change the jaws on this vise, and they're probably best known for their tube fly apparatus that you put on here for tying tubes. So HMH is an excellent, excellent vise, and very, very well made, very nicely machined, and very nice. So let's get into some of the more advanced looking type of true rotary vices. This happens to be the rotary vise from Peak, and basically most of these are about the same. There's an offset here that provides for a straight alignment, and when I turn that fly, you can see that the fly stays in perfect alignment with the shaft, so there's no movement at all like there might be on some of the other ones. So these true rotational or fully rotary vices are real handy. Typically there's a way to set the tension here with a nut, and most of them have some sort of a turnstile handle on them. I like the outrigger here, so I can just grab it and turn it this way. I would say this, that if you are looking at either upgrading a vise and you've used a stationary, or if you're a beginner and you're thinking that you're really going to get into fly tying, I would consider jumping into a rotational vise, because eventually you're going to need it. Eventually you're going to want it. You're going to eventually have the need for everybody has to put on dubbing. Everybody has to put on chenille. Everybody has to palmer hackle onto their fly eventually. And if you start tying up a bunch of woolly buggers and stuff like that, these vices are fantastic for it, as well as just about any other type of fly. This particular rotational one is very well made, and the thing I like about it probably the most is this great big plate pedestal on it. It's very, very solid and heavy enough so it won't rock when I start torquing on it if I'm spinning deer hair or something like that. There's all kinds of different apparatus you can get with these, you know, lights, and this is a bobbin cradle right here to keep that bobbin out of the way while you're spinning and that sort of thing. But keep these different types of vices in mind and think about which one might be the best for you. There's a lot of information about these vices individually on flybass.biz. You can take a look at those, and when you're there, don't forget to take a look at some of these new poppers that I have. I talked about misalignment, and with these poppers you can see that there's a hole right down the middle of it, and there's no way that you're going to get off alignment with the hole going right directly down the middle of the fly. So the placement of that hook in the popper is perfect every time. And you can get different types of assortment packs of these popper bodies on flybass.biz, and they're selling very well. So something else for you to consider. Brad Miller with flybass.com. Nice talking to you. Hope to see you on the water. By the way, it's 35 below here this morning in Minnesota, so it's going to be a while before we're thinking about some actual top water smallmouth action, but it's something that we think about almost every day. So look forward to seeing you on the water. So long.